Welcome back! The doctor is in. Today I thought I would talk about my first writing project for the BattleTech game universe. This work appeared in the book that you see pictured here, Masters and Minions of the StarCorps Dossiers. This was an interesting project to work on. I had been a playtester and a fact-checker for about 5 years when this book came out, or before I started working on this book, and I asked if there was any need for someone else to contribute writing. I wanted to be a writer. I thought I could handle the work, and I thought I could provide a valuable contribution. So when I made that request, it took a while, and eventually I was added into the solicitation pool. So when they sent out a request asking writers if they wanted to work on this project, I of course jumped right on it. However, I was cautious. I did not want to bite off more than I could chew, so rather than request an entire chapter or a major faction to write, I asked to write just for very small portions of the book. I wanted to see how the process worked, and I wanted to make sure that I could deliver on time, that I could deliver good quality, and that everybody would be happy with what I did. So instead of requesting even a periphery, a major periphery nation, I asked for the Franc Reaches. If you are familiar with BattleTech, you might know the Franc Reaches are kind of a small state in between two of the major periphery realms, the Taurian Concordat and the Magistracy of Canopus. They jointly formed the Franc Reaches, but they called it the New Colony Region. When the New Colony Region achieved independence, they renamed themselves the Franc Reaches. And so I wanted to write for them because they were new, and therefore they had fewer canon sources to check, so there was less chance that I would screw it up when I wrote for it. So here was the first line of my work that appeared in print. It's the opening line to the Franc Reaches section. This is the published version, and I thought that it worked okay, but I think my original version, this is what I submitted, and I'll go ahead and read it. The afterbirth of a greatly received and trumpeted notion, the Franc Reaches struggled to life, not with the defiant roar of a lion, but with the plaintive whine of a late-term pleasure circus abortion whose cord was cut too soon. And that was probably a little too graphic of a line for BattleTech. You can see how they changed it into the resulting product of a well-received and much trumpeted notion. The Franc Reaches struggled to life not with the defiant roar of a lion, but with the plaintive whine of a late-term Canopian cow. So you can see that they toned it down a little bit. And what makes me laugh is I had completely forgotten my original version of this because it was so long ago. I wrote this in it was in 2008, and I think I can find the original date here. I wrote this in November 2008, and looking back on it, I think my original was really good. It's just it kind of missed the mark with the tone that BattleTech strikes. So I can see why they edited it, but I can definitely see that it was something I wrote. It's got the different sort of syntax and approach that I put into my writing. So I think it's kind of funny to look and see the original version versus the published version. I hope you find it as interesting as I do. So, because I wrote there was another issue. So, the the major parts of the colonial marshals, I'll show here. So Carver Trondell was the first president of the Franc Reaches, and my original version of his write-up had him as a farmer who rose to political prominence and eventually led the nation. Now, if I remember the sequence of things, there was another book that came out after I wrote that background for Carver Trondell, but the other book came out first, and it had a conflicting background for Trondell, so I had to rewrite mine to match what had already been published. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind if you are writing for BattleTech or other game universes. You're going to have to maintain consistency with the canon of what's been published. If you write something and someone else later writes on the same topic, but their piece gets published first, yours may no longer be viable because it may contradict what's been published. So, again, this was the first thing I worked on. I accepted it as part of the process, and I rewrote to have him as a mine foreman, which was in, I think it may have been Handbook Major Periphery States, but I could be wrong. So I wrote the description for Carver Trondell, I wrote the description for Dirk McEvans, I wrote the description for the Colonial Marshals, and then I wrote the game rules for Trondell and Dirk McEvans for people who you might want to use them in a role-playing situation. And one of the consequences of this is I became kind of the periphery guy for a while, a couple years. I wrote the Field Report Periphery, I wrote Objectives Periphery, I believe I wrote the Periphery chapter in Field Manual 3085. When we get to that, we'll talk about that. And so, and then my first fiction piece that I sold as a story was about the Colonial Marshals, so they really kind of shaped my course of, or the course of my BattleTech writing career. So I have very fond memories. I love the Franc Reaches. I love the Periphery. To me, it's the most exciting place. You can, especially with the Franc Reaches and the Colonial Marshals, to me that was a lot like a space western. And I enjoyed that quite a bit. So, because I was writing small parts, I also asked to write some of the mercenary elements. So I wrote a little bit about the Canopian mercenaries and the Franc Reaches mercenary hiring. These were, I believe, sidebars that ended up becoming almost a whole page, just as I'm showing you here. I also wrote the small section for the MRBC, the Mercenary Review and Bonding Commission. So I wrote this whole little section, and I think I wrote it as a sidebar, but it became just like a little a chapter section. So this also kind of got me into writing mercenary stuff, which I did in Error Report 3052 and Field Manual 3085 and some other sources. So I also wrote just mercenary employment, not necessarily for the Franc Reaches or the Magistracy of Canopia, or of Canopus, but also just what the major powers were, how they were handling. And this, I believe, was a full page. And that's pretty much what I wrote. It was fairly short, maybe in a Word document about 8 pages. What I found interesting when I was looking for my old files to look at the comparison between the published version and my original version is I had completely forgotten that originally this book was not called Masters and Minions. When they were having everyone write for it, it was called Notable Players. Now, it's possible that was a temporary title. I'm not sure. Maybe they just had that as a filler until they finalized the actual title. You can see it's quite a bit different from Notable Players to Masters and Minions, the StarCorps Dossiers. That's a big change. And again, titles change. That's a typical thing in publishing, so it's one of the things you get used to after you work on a few different products. So that's what I have to say today. I hope you like it. Let me know if you have any questions about this particular topic. So I'd like to leave you with, if you like what I'm saying, if you like any of my BattleTech writing, if you want to see some of my independent fiction, Cats of War 2 is my newest book. It came out, 10 days ago. It's 4 original tales of military fantasy and military science fiction with a feline twist. There is a short story, 2 novelettes, and a brand new Warpiper novella. I'm quite proud of this. I think all these stories are good. If you give that a check, let me know what you think of it. Maybe leave a review on Amazon. And I hope you'll have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. The Doctor is out.